All right, everybody. So I think we can get started. So first of all, I'd like to thank you all for joining the Cycling 101 webinar. And I'm really excited to announce that we have a Master Can Bike instructor, Jackie Snyder, who is the owner of Adventurers, here with us to run through the Cycling 101 webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our Can Bike instructor, Jackie Snyder, to give you guys the Cycling 101 presentation.
Hi there, everyone. I hope my voice is clear. Welcome to our presentation. So let me just start by explaining a little bit what that means in terms of master cycling instructor and can bike. Basically what that means is I am trained to train people to become cycling instructors teaching can bike, which is a national program endorsed by Transportation Canada and allows people who have certification in it who do their work on a bicycle to get reduced rates with insurance and what have you. So it's a great tool for people who work in security and that kind of thing, paramedics, the police get can bike training as well. So it just gives you a sense of the depth of can bike, and it is national and a certification program. And I think it's really the only certifying program in Canada. So that's what that's about. So today we're going to talk about cycling and road safety. The majority of the can bike programs are about largely about commuting versus recreational cycling, and there are other programs that are more suited to that. So this is a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So first of all, we'll talk about what we can do as individuals to be safe on our bicycle, and we'll cover things like the clothing, the mechanics of the bicycle, how to communicate with other users of the road, and the knowledge that we need to have as cyclists that is going to make us safer. Okay, including understanding the Highway Traffic Act and our position on the road. So to start at the top, we'll deal with the helmet, and on top of that, on top of our heads, is our helmet. So everybody should be wearing a certified helmet that's no more than 5 years old, and it's only good for one fall. So how do you know this information? Well, if you look on the inside of the helmet, there should be some stickers that tell you that it's certified, and there's various organizations like ANSI, SNEL, CSA, and a few other international ones. They're only good for 5 years because the styrofoam on the inside does dry out and harden, so it won't absorb the shock the way that it's supposed to. And if you've had one fall with your helmet, it could have compromised the integrity of the helmet. You may not see a crack in it, but it will still affect it. So best to get a new one. How does it work? Well, what happens is it's got this smooth cover over the top of it that's designed specifically like that. It's not just a shell to make it look pretty, but the smooth surface spreads the impact, and it also allows your head to slide. So we shouldn't be putting things on our helmet like stickers or GoPros or lights in the helmet, because it affects its ability to do its job. The other thing, as I already said, is the styrofoam absorbs the impact a little bit, so that helps a lot. What we should do is not leave it in a hot car all day, but keep it out of sunlight in a cool space, bring it into an air-conditioned space, at least where sun is not shining directly on it, and you can just clean it off with a gentle soap, like a dish soap or a hand soap or something along those lines. Can you wear a hockey helmet to cycle? The answer to that is no. You need to wear a helmet that's designed for the activity that you're doing, because they're designed to protect you from the specific types of fall that you will have in that activity. And in order for it to protect us properly, we need to wear it properly. So first off, is the size. It should fit you snugly. So if you put it on your head when you're buying one, or well, anytime, put it on your head, and you should be able to shake your head or nod your head without it wiggling all around. They do come with a crown ring or added pads that you can put on the inside to adjust the size of it. Every manufacturer makes them a little bit differently. So some of us have narrower heads and others have wider, and they all come in medium, small, and large. So try on helmets from a couple of different manufacturers to make sure that it's comfortable for you and it fits properly. And then we need to set it in the right position. So we have the 2-for-1 or 2v1 rule. So 2 fingers from your eyebrow to the rim of the helmet is where it should sit forward. So it's covering your forehead sufficiently. And then the 2 fours, if you hold up your middle finger and your index finger on each hand to make 2 V's. That's the 4 fingers, and you put those over your ears. It indicates that the side straps, so in the lower image here, the 2 side straps will come together just below and in front of your earlobes, or roughly around the jaw, the hinge of your jaw. And those hold your helmet in the right place, forward and backwards, so your helmet doesn't slide backwards on your head, as so many of them do. Okay. And then finally the chin straps. So you should do that up snugly enough that you can only fit 1 finger between your chin and the strap when your head is at a normal angle, not tilted back or scrunched forward. Okay. So make sure that it's done up properly. If you have a lot of excess loose end, you can trim that off and just melt the end of it so that it doesn't fray on you. Okay, and then I like to sort of work my way down my full body from just under the helmet, just to make sure that I have the appropriate gear to keep me comfortable and safe. So under my helmet would be protective eyewear, so sunglasses or clear glasses if I'm riding at night. It's not just about keeping the sun out of our eyes, but it's also about the debris that flies up off the road, or the wind, bugs in the air, that kind of thing. Or when cars go by, there's all kinds of debris that flies up around us as cyclists. So make sure that we can see properly. Then all the clothing that we wear, we should be wearing bright clothing so that people can see us better. So one of the best ways to be safe is to ensure people can see us properly. And if you're cycling in the summer where it gets really hot, a lighter color is going to keep you cooler. Okay. If you're cycling at night, wear clothing with reflective capabilities on it. You can either add a vest, or just have clothing like jackets and things that have it. And then anything with loose strings need to be tucked away or tied up so that they don't catch on the things that you're cycling by. And it does happen. Then look at the weather to determine what's going on. You know, at this time of year, in the spring and the fall, we get varied conditions throughout the day. So if you're commuting to work, you might get one temperature when you're going into work and another temperature when you come out. It's often sort of cooler early in the morning, and then as the day progresses, it gets warmer. And sometimes we're more prone to rain at this time of year, and varied times of the day. So make sure that you have something with you. Okay, good. And so here's an example of some different areas where you can get reflective items on your bike and your clothing. So you'll notice on this image that there's white reflective tape on the front fork of the bicycle. So the fork that goes down to the center of the front wheel. And you should have red reflective tape on the seat stay and the chain stay. And that's so that if a car is coming at you through an intersection and about to T-bone you, they can see you. You've got lights on the front and the back of the bike, hopefully, but at a sideway angle, at a perpendicular angle, you want to be seen as well. And that indicates to the drivers which direction you're traveling. So if they need to take evasive action to miss you, they know which direction to go in to keep you safest. Okay. So, and then any additional things like reflectors on the wheels and on the pedals and that kind of thing are all always helpful. They've got reflective materials on the helmet, but make sure that if don't add it on yourself. You can always buy a helmet that has something like that in it, or something bright. We don't want to impede the helmet's ability to do its job. Okay, and so once we know we're all safe, we'll move on and we'll check our bicycle before we get to it. So we'll do what's called an ABCD quick check. Okay, so A being air and everything to do with the wheels. So what we're going to do first is we're going to check the air pressure in the tire. So take the palm of your hand and lean on each of the tires. You want to put your weight into it. Some people like to squeeze the tire walls or press down with their thumbs, but I think about it from the perspective that my body weight is going to be on this bicycle, and are my fingers strong enough to carry that weight between a pinch or by pushing down with my thumb? For me, I know they're not, and for smaller people, certainly not. If you're really strong, then you may be able to, but I find leaning on the tire is the best sense for me. Okay, and then everything to do with the wheels, well, we can pick up the front end of the bike and spin the wheel forward and just make sure that it's not warped, or that the wheel is true, and it's not rubbing against the brakes, and that everything's running smoothly. And you can grab a handful of the spokes on the front and the back just to make sure that none of those are coming loose. Then the next thing we will check is the bells, bars, and brakes. So in terms of the bells, by law, you have to have a working bell or bell horn or gong physically attached to the bicycle. So what's a gong? Well, a gong is like, it always makes people laugh. It's like a bell, but it's one of those ones where you pull the little lever downwards and release it, and it flicks back up and hits the bell part. So that's how it makes the sound versus the lever that you push sideways. So you have to have that. For the bars, we mean the handlebars. This is your steering column. So what we're going to do is we're going to stand in front of the bicycle and put the wheel between our legs. So we're bracing the wheel so that it can't move. And then we're going to try and turn the handlebars separately from the wheels. We should not be able to do this, but we need to make sure that it's nice and tight. Okay. And then the major one as well is our brakes. Okay, so there's, in most bikes, we have brakes on the right and on the left. So everything on the right side of the bike has to do with the rear of the bike. So your gear system is the same. So what we'll do is we'll squeeze the right brake lever and push the bicycle forward. And what should happen is the wheel won't turn, but the bicycle will skid across the surface. Okay, so as long as the wheel is not turning, then it's good. And then to check the front brake, we'll do the same. We'll squeeze the left lever and push the bike forward. This one will completely stop the bicycle. So the wheel won't turn at all, but the back end may come up a bit in retaliation. So, and it just makes us aware of the risk of using the front brake alone. The best way to brake is to use both brakes. The other thing that we can check on with the brakes is when you squeeze your levers in, you should have room to put 2 fingers between the handlebar and the lever. If there's more space in there, it means that the cables, your brake cables, have stretched out, and eventually when you squeeze your handlebars, you won't get any braking power at all. So so good to deal with that. Maybe take it into a bike shop and get them to shorten it up a little bit. And they do stretch, that's normal. The other thing we can look at is the brake pads. Make sure that they're only pressing against the rims of the bicycle and they're not touching the rubber tire at all, okay, because that can build up heat and it can cause you to get a flat tire and it can wear through your tire. So and then we'll move on to C, which stands for chains, crankshafts, including the pedals, and then the cables as well. So chains should, funnily enough, I often ask this question, what color should your chain be? And everybody tells me that it should be black. But the reality is that if it's black, it's probably dirty unless it's been spray painted black. But the reason it's usually black is that it hasn't been cleaned for a long time, and it doesn't, it doesn't take long for it to get black. So as you're cycling along the road, all the oils and dirt that's on the road get onto the chain, and so they turn black fairly quickly. That stuff is gritty and it becomes like sandpaper, and it wears down the components of our bicycle. So we should clean our bicycle fairly regularly. But you can, do it on a fairly regular basis just by putting a little bit of bicycle lube onto the chain and then wiping some of it off, and you'll find a lot of the dirt will come off that way. And then just apply a little bit more. You don't want too much lube on your bicycle. It shouldn't be dripping off, and it shouldn't be, too thick. So but you need enough that it will help everything move smoothly. Okay, and then we talk about the crankshafts and the pedals. So the crankshaft is the bar that attaches to the bottom bracket where the pedals all attach to the bicycle. Okay, so what we're going to do is take hold of the pedal arms and pull them away from the bicycle perpendicularly. So not forward and backwards, but sideways away from the bicycle. And we're listening for any sort of a clunking, thunking kind of sound that comes from where they attach to the bicycle. Okay. And then we'll also grab hold of the pedals themselves and pull them away. And then we need to spin, we can spin the pedals independently and spin the whole cranks independently, just to make sure that everything's moving smoothly. Okay, you can spin them backwards if they're not moving or the gears are catching up. It may be because you're out of gear, and you'll find if you put your bike properly in gear, like pick up the back end and pedal a couple of times forward, it should put it into gear, and then try making it go backwards, and it should go smoothly. And then the last of the C's is the cables, which we touched on previously in terms of one aspect of which is the stretch of the cables. So if you look at the cables on the bicycles, a lot of them are covered in a plastic housing. And so we want to look to see that that's in reasonable shape. If it's full of cracks, there's a good chance that water's getting inside and can start to rust the cables inside. But you should be able to tell, like when you grab your brakes, if it doesn't come in and release smoothly, then there's a chance that there's some corrosion going on inside. You can also look at the ends where it's attached to the actual brake pads and what have you. Make sure that it's not fraying at the ends and that there's no rusting going on there, because those are signs that they may snap on you when you need them. Okay, so it's for the brakes as well as for the gear shifters. Okay, and then the final thing that we're going to do is we're going to drop our bicycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick it up just a ½ inch off the ground or so, and just let it bounce off the wheels lightly. You don't have to slam it down. And so why on earth would I want to drop my bicycle? Well, what we're doing is we're going to be listening carefully to the sounds that they make. So certain things are going to rattle all the time, like the chain. the chain and the derailleurs that move the chain around, they're all on springs, so they're always going to move a little bit. But there's other things that are screwed onto the bike that could potentially come off. And of course, what happens is if you're cycling down the road and something flies off your bicycle, we tend to do silly things like jam on our brakes suddenly or swerve out into traffic. So we want to avoid doing something like that. So by picking up the bike and dropping it, we're listening for things that are rattling. And some of those things would be, well, first, one of the major ones is kick release on the bicycle. They tend to come loose and they can get caught up in our rear wheel, or they can cause a lot of damage. So if you have a kickstand on your bike, make sure you check it every time before you go out for a ride. Other things that come loose are any screws. Like if you have a rack on the back of your bike to carry a pannier, where that's screwed onto your bicycle, check the screws on that to make sure they're nice and tight. Your water bottle cages, and then anything that's screwed onto the handlebars. Okay. Finally is quick release. So what quick releases are they're little levers that are on your bicycle to make certain things easy to take on and off your bike. And usually you find them on, the most common is the front wheel. Sometimes it's also on the rear wheel. And some people also have it on their seats. So what it means is those components are easy to take off your bicycle. And on the wheels, it's great for if you get a flat tire, or if you're putting your bicycle in and out of the car, then it's often easier if you take the front wheel off the bicycle. So you want to make sure that they're on securely. They should curl towards the bicycle, not away from the bicycle. You can push in with a bit of pressure, but it doesn't have to be extreme pressure. Like you shouldn't need to be an Ironman or a weightlifter to be able to open up the levers on the quick release. Okay. And then also make sure, try and point them in a direction where they're protected by the either the fork of the bicycle, or tucked in between the seat stay and the chain stay on the bicycle at the back. So they're not in a position where they can get caught and flipped open if you cycled past bushes or construction sites where there's construction tape floating around or that sort of thing. Okay, so good. Now we're on our bicycles. The bicycle is safe. And just to add a point to that, the ABCD quick check, the reason we do that is to determine before we get on our bike if there's an issue with our bike that needs to be dealt with before we ride. Okay, so now that's all safe when we're out on the road, and we need to communicate. So how do we communicate? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And who are we communicating with? Well, we're going to be communicating with all other users of the road. So it could be pedestrians, it could be other cyclists, it could be people in cars and motorbikes and that kind of thing. Okay, so a major form of communication for us is our hand signals. In cars, people have the signals in the car, but we don't have that. So we're going to use our hands. Okay, so we want people to know what we're going to do next, so they can take the appropriate action so that we don't get into conflict with them. Okay, also the way that we ride on the road communicates our intentions to people, right? So if we're riding in a nice straight line, people know what we're going to do next. If we're swerving all over the place, drivers and other users of the road get nervous around us. Okay, where we're positioning on ourselves on the road tells people what we're doing. So for instance, when we're making a left turn, we should be more to the left of our lane, so people know what we're going to do. So being predictable is really key. Okay, and then eye contact is a really major form of communication that a lot of people don't think about. By looking at somebody else who's sharing the road with me, I can tell whether they're going to be kind to me as a cyclist, or whether they think that I shouldn't be there at all. Okay, and then finally, your voice. Okay, so your voice is a really good alternative. I find often when I ring my bell that people think of me as just some kid around, and they sort of tune it out because so many kids play with their bells so much. So I find often I don't get people's attention, so I may follow it up with my voice. And I just also want to remind you, or just sort of highlight this point, which I haven't actually said, is that under the Highway Traffic Act, a bicycle is a vehicle. So you are allowed to be on the road, but you have to follow the rules of the road as they're laid out. And that includes signaling your intentions, okay? So do you know the hand signals? Here are some of them, okay? So if you're gonna turn left, put your left arm out. The preferred right turn signal is using our right turn arm and stretching that out in the direction of your turn. The CAN bike way is usually that the hand, the back of the hand is facing backwards, so your thumb is facing down. It's a little bit more deliberate and clear. We don't want people thinking that we're pointing at something or just stretching out our arm, so we want it to be nice and clear. And there is the alternate right with the left hand, okay? And then a stop sign is also always with the left hand, okay? Good. So and then we get into the final point, which is our knowledge and what the Highway Traffic Act says. And as I just stated, cyclists are considered vehicle operators. A bicycle is considered a vehicle under the Highway Traffic Act. That means we have the same rights. So we're allowed to be on the road, but we also have the same responsibilities as all the other road users. So that means we have to stop at stop signs, stop at red lights, and we have to communicate with other people. The Highway Traffic Act doesn't state that we shouldn't get confrontational, but we really shouldn't get confrontational. These days, people do crazy things. We end up with drivers on the hoods of other people's cars and all kinds of unusual behaviors out there. So it's not worth it. You know, if somebody else is getting upset about something, they're having a bad day, and it's in our safety concerns to keep out of the way and look after ourselves and let them go on and try not to let it impact us, okay? So, good. So, under the Highway Traffic Act, most infractions carry an $85 penalty, and they can get as high as, well, $265 for careless driving. Okay, and then the one that a lot of people ask about is, what is the law regarding riding two cyclists side by side in a space? And that varies from municipality to municipality. So you have to think about where you are and know where you're riding and understand what those rules are. Generally speaking, if there's another lane and we're not blocking all the traffic, then it's acceptable, but we need to be paying attention. Often cyclists ride side by side so they can talk to somebody else, which is fine as long as you're still paying attention to what's going on around you and you're keeping safe as well. The other nice thing about riding two abreast is that it takes half the amount of time for a car to pass you. But again, it depends on the width of the lane and the number of lanes and the speed of traffic and that kind of thing. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that there's a whole array of very similar violations for cyclists as there are for car drivers. Okay, so there's a few more. Okay, we've got a lot of them in here. Okay, so now we'll get into, we'll finally get out on the road, and where do we position ourselves when we're riding? What's the safest spot? So our general rule, what the Highway Traffic Act says is as far to the right as is practical, and we ride in the same direction as other users of the road. Okay, so we often see cyclists riding on the wrong side of the road, you know, cycling towards traffic, which is highly dangerous. Basically, as a cyclist, we're moving a lot faster than a pedestrian would move. And if you think about the impact, and the speed differential. So for instance, if the car is going 40 kilometers an hour and an average cyclist rides 20 kilometers an hour, if there's a collision between the two, if they're going in opposite directions, the speed of the impact would be 60 kilometers an hour if they're going against each other. But if they're going in the same direction, it would only be 20 kilometers an hour. So the damage would be a lot less if you're going in the same direction. Okay, so in this image here, what we see is our general rule of thumb. What is practical for a cyclist is to ride a meter away from the curb edge. So that puts us outside the sewer grates, manhole covers, well, not all manhole covers, but certainly the sewer grates, and the road edge hazards. The edge of the road tends to get broken up more than any other part of the road, and they're convex by design, so that means they're higher in the middle and all the debris gets washed down to the side, which is very dangerous for cyclists. Okay, so we cycle a meter out, and in this, which is a standard wide lane, there's enough room for us as a cyclist to share that lane. So one acronym that we use a lot in CANbike is MVPC, and a good way to remember it is Most Valuable Person Cycles. But what it really stands for is maneuverability, visibility, predictability, and communication. So in terms of the maneuverability, by being a meter away from the curb, you're giving yourself an escape route. So if a car gets a little bit too close to you, you have a little bit of room to get out of the way, or if there's an obstacle in your path, okay? Visibility, you can be better seen as part of the flow of traffic if you're a little bit further out. You're not lost in the clutter of trees and mailboxes and pedestrians if you're too close to the sidewalk. Predictability, nice straight line, okay, and communication. So in riding a nice straight line, you're communicating where you're going as a cyclist. Okay. So you're cycling along and we're always looking ahead to see what's coming up. So we have time to plan our route. If we see an obstruction in front of us, what we have to do is shoulder check, signal, shoulder check, okay? So as this person is doing here, you can see there's a pothole. So the first time we're looking back to make sure that the path is clear for us. Then we're signaling to tell people what we're doing. And then we're shoulder checking one more time. And we should be listening at this point as well, because what often happens is, as a cyclist, I'm riding along, I tell somebody I'm about to move out. If I don't look first and we get an impatient driver behind us, sometimes what happens is they go, oh no, I don't want to get caught behind that slow cyclist, so I'm going to step on my gas and get past them before they pull out. If I didn't look back and notice them and didn't listen, I wouldn't know that, okay? So then we go past the obstacle, and then before we pull back to the curb, we should look over to the right. And the reason being is that maybe somebody will be on a mountain bike and they can do a bunny hop over that object, or maybe somebody will be about to step off the curb, okay? So we want to make sure that it's clear for us before we move in that direction, okay? So then just to continue on, in the first image I showed you, it was a standard wide lane. So we were riding a meter to the left of the curb, okay? Let's look at the top part of this one, which is a narrow lane. So there's not enough room for me to ride a meter from the curb and share that lane with another car. So as a cyclist, I can use any part of the road that my safety warrants. So I'm going to take the middle of that lane to discourage other users from trying to share that lane with me unsafely. Because if I stay too close to the edge, they might try and pass me, and then they'll end up being too close to me. They may hit my handlebars, which could cause me to have an accident. Generally speaking, when there's a narrow lane, there's usually more than one narrow lane. Sometimes there's parked cars in that other one, and there's usually enough room in those lanes with parked cars to share that lane with other cars if they're reasonable size. When they get big, then we may have to move out and take the other narrow lane as well. So, which we're allowed to do, okay? So then if we look down to the bottom one here, which is an extra wide lane, this is actually wider than the standard wide lane we talked about earlier. So technically there'd be enough room for 2 cars to fit in that space. So as a cyclist, in this case, I want to be a meter to the right of the flow of traffic rather than a meter to the left of the curb, okay? And the reason being is that I want to still be seen as part of the flow of traffic. So I'll still be in the peripheral view of other users of the road, okay? So then we moved on to parked cars. So we're riding along, we look ahead and we see that there's cars parked in front of us. So again, we want to be a meter away from parked cars. We don't want to get what they call the door prize, which is, of course, cycling along too close to the car and somebody suddenly opens the door. And a lot of cyclists do that. They cycle too close, and commonly, this is a common accident for cyclists. Even though it's the driver's fault for not looking, it's not going to help us with our broken bones and mangled bicycles. So what can we do to keep ourselves safe? We can stay out of the door zone. Okay, so that's a meter away. And as I'm cycling along, I'm looking for signs that maybe there's somebody in that car. What we do is we don't want to be swerving in towards the curb when there's just a small amount of space between 2 cars, because we become unpredictable. So people think we're getting off the road, and if there was a car coming behind and then we suddenly pop out, it could be disastrous. So the general rule of thumb is that if the space between the cars is equivalent to 10 cars or more, then you can pull in, but otherwise stay out and continue in a nice straight line. So, and you'll notice at the beginning of, on the left side of the image, of course, anytime we change our position on the road, we're communicating our intentions. So shoulder check, signal, shoulder check, and then move your position, okay? So, there we go. Okay, so, oops, I just went one too far. So this one's talking about passing on the right. So this is sort of an unusual scenario here. What we've got is, let's look at the 2 cars on the right side of the lane. The first one is, the one closest to the intersection is parked, and the next one back is just dropping people off. And then the 2 on the left side of the lane are actually engaged in motion, so they're traveling. So I'm a cyclist and I come up. Would I be passing on the right? Well, technically by law you're actually allowed to pass on the right, but in this case I don't have my maneuverability space, so I'm not going to do it. Plus, of course, people are going to come up so out of the car. So how would I handle this situation? Well, I have a number of options as a cyclist. So the first is I can always become a pedestrian really quickly. I just jump off my bike and walk around and then put my bike back on the road when this space is clear. The alternative is I can shoulder check, signal, shoulder check to the left and merge into the flow of traffic on that side when it's safe to do so. And a final option I have is I could choose to wait for that car that's dropping a passenger, but I need to think about a few things. So first off, I want to make sure that that car can see me. So I'm going to position myself centered behind that car. So if they look in the rear view mirror, they can see me. And I'm not going to be too close in case they suddenly put their car in reverse and back up without looking. So I need to think about all these things, okay? So do I have the space and how predictable am I being, okay? But we have lots of options, okay? So here we go. Let's look at the little segment on the left part of this image first. So this car in both cases is making a right-hand turn, okay? And we're the cyclist going straight through. So in the first part of the image, it's not an ideal situation for a cyclist. But what it points out to us is, first off, cyclists, well, drivers misinterpret the rate that the speed that a cyclist travels at. So they often think that they can outrun us to the intersection, and that's often where we get a right hook. So if I was the cyclist coming into this position, I would try and make eye contact with that driver. I may pull further forward so I can look back at them and ensure that I'm in a position of visibility. The other thing I can do is I can stop and let the car go. The other thing that we should think about as a cyclist is, as we're coming up to a situation like this, if the car is signaling to turn right, I shouldn't be sneaking up on the right side. I should let the car go. So if you look in the forward, in the right scenario, notice how close the right turning car is to the curb, and that's where they should be if they're making a right turn. Then all the cyclists in that front part are all in the correct position, depending on what they got when they got to that intersection. Okay. So here we're talking about destination positioning, and basically what this is about is an intersection. An intersection is the most dangerous place for anybody to be, whether you're a pedestrian, a driver, or a cyclist. So as a cyclist, we want to be as clear as possible. So before I get into the intersection, I look ahead, I see there's a parked car. I want to be a meter to the left of the parked car, so I align myself properly before I go. If I were to drop down to the right, I would be becoming unpredictable. People might think I'm turning, and then I have to fight my way back in later. So, think about it in perspective of, what if there's no parked cars here, but there's parked cars there? I think unless there was no parked cars, that would be the only time that I would come closer to the curb in this situation. Okay. So right turn only lanes for cyclists. If you're not making a right turn, stay out of the right turn only lane. Before you reach the right turn lane, just do a shoulder check to make sure that other drivers are aware that you're going straight through and you're not planning on going in that direction. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, so then we get into left turns, which become a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do in here, oops, we're jumping ahead. We're going to shoulder check signal, shoulder check, move into the middle of the lane, do another signal. As we go through the intersection, both hands should be on the handlebar. And then we land in the same position in the new lane as we left the old lane. So in the middle of the lane. And then shoulder check signal, shoulder check, and pull to the right. So this is a standard residential road, okay? And we always want to take the lane when we're making a left turn in a residential. So that means be in the middle of our side of the street so that we don't encourage other cars to shadow us through the intersection, which could leave us in a vulnerable spot. Okay. And then when there's a multitude of lanes, we'll take them one lane at a time. So with each movement, we're shoulder checking, signaling, shoulder checking. This is the shortest direction through the intersection. So we're landing in the leftmost lane and then working our way over to the curb edge again. Okay. With railway tracks and any uneven pavements, what we want to do is cross them at a 90-degree angle. So that means we have to determine what angle they're coming across the road that we're on, position ourselves accordingly. So we need to shoulder check signal, shoulder check again, get ourselves into the right position. Take your bum off the seat, put your pedals the same height off the ground and stand on them a little bit so it's a bit of a platform, and be nice and loose in your joints so that your body acts as a bit of a shock absorber, and then you'll cross over, okay? And then four-way intersections. So who has the right of way here? The general rule of thumb is the person, if they both got there at the same time, the person on the right has the right of way. And if you're a cyclist, the rule is the same. However, if B got there first, then B goes first, okay? So, and then, so this is an interesting scenario, a one-way street with multiple turn lanes. So if we're a cyclist starting on the right side of this image going through to the left, most of them are self-explanatory. If you're turning right, you're going to be in the rightmost lane. If you're going straight through, you'll be in the middle of the center lane. If you're turning left and there's more than one lane, you're going to take the rightmost lane that is going to get you to your destination. So in this case, what you're going to do is you would go in the middle, you would take the middle lane. So you'd be in the middle of the middle lane, and then you would land in the rightmost lane. Okay. Good. So we just got a couple more. Emerge and diverge. This is over a highway. If I'm coming along here, basically, I'm going to maintain my standard road position, shoulder check a lot in both directions, maintain my speed as much as I can, okay, and just continue straight through, okay. And then trucks, we want to just be very careful with trucks, make sure that give them space, okay? They have huge blind spots, and they're noisy, so they can't hear or see you, and they make funny turns. So stay out of their way, okay? There's one, I'm just gonna jump back because I think there's a slide that was not in there that I didn't see. Yeah, it disappeared. It was about streetcar tracks, turning, doing an arterial left turn on streetcar tracks. So that's another one of those exceptions to the rules. We want our front wheel to be at 90 degrees over each of the tracks. Okay, so you don't have to signal when you're going over tracks. And usually it goes fairly slowly. When you're making a left turn with streetcar tracks, again, you're going to land on the right lane because that is the safest place for cyclists to be. There's no tracks in the rightmost lane. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for the great presentation. I'm sure we've all learned so much from it. We actually do have a question from Pamela, and she said, at a red light, I saw a cyclist stop about a car length back from the intersection. I'm guessing that was to give right turning cars room to turn. Is this the proper way to wait for a green light?
No, as a cyclist, you are the same as a car. So would you hang back to let other cars drive past? Probably not. So I would pull forward, take your space, and the car would need to wait until it's clear.
Okay, great, perfect. So we're just still waiting for a few more people to submit their questions.
Sure.
But in the meantime, Jackie, I have a question for you. I was just wondering, a lot of people may be afraid to ride on the road for certain reasons because they feel it's safety and things like that. What would be your advice to people who want to try cycling but still have that fear?
I would recommend taking a CAN bike course. Really, I'm not being paid by CAN bike to say this, but it's something that you will learn a lot about, some bike handling skills, which will give you a lot of confidence. And they start with they do a level 3 course is learning to ride on quiet roads, so residential streets. So it's a little less intimidating. And then after that, if you feel like your confidence has grown, then you can take the level 4 course, which gets you into the more complex arterial roads.
Okay, great. And then another question we had was, obviously there's a massive difference between cycling downtown and cycling up in York Region. If people want to maybe make that transition from cycling from York Region to downtown, is there any tips that you would give them? Because it is a little bit more, I think people have a little bit more fear about that.
Well, the biggest approach to safety is thinking, or one of the biggest is thinking about your route and planning your route. So, and one of the tools that I use a lot when I'm trying to, figure out how to get from one spot to another on my bicycle is Google Maps. So there's, if you're doing it on a desktop or a laptop, there's an option there where you can choose the mode of transportation, whether it's a a bicycle or a car, or you're walking, and it will give you the routes, and it often gives you some options. And it, you know, often it will, like for cycling, it will give you as many routes as possible that are more bicycle friendly than not. So, you know, so that's a great tool. So plan it out in advance. Yeah, and then the other thing that you get a little bit more of when you get is, as you're getting sort of further north of the city, you're getting into more rural environments where you have soft road edges. You don't have the curb per se, like the hard cement curb. So if you have a soft shoulder, you can ride a little bit closer to the edge of the road. So a half a meter versus a full meter. Okay.
So Jackie, we have one more question from Sonia, and she wants to know, what are some essentials that cyclists should carry with them? And are there any repair materials, first aid items, anything you can divulge in on that?
Sure, sure. Well, what you should have is a sort of a simple maintenance kit, which would include what's called a multi-tool. So it usually has a bunch of little Allen keys attached to all together, which cover the major pieces that you would use to tighten up bolts and things on your bicycle. And you can get that at any bike store, or Smart Commute sometimes distributes those kinds of things. You should also have a patch kit with you to patch a tube, which would include the rubber cement glue and a variety of patches and a little piece of sandpaper and what we call tire levers, or tire irons to help you get the tire off. And you can take a course on how to fix a tire. A lot of bike shops will offer fixing a flat, little seminars and that kind of thing. It's, you know, it seems daunting if you've never done it, but if you practice it a few times, it's actually not that complicated. So, and then, yeah, I usually carry a little first aid kit with me with a few Band-Aids and that kind of thing. And I always have a bicycle pump with me, and I tend to carry a spare tube rather than trying to fix it when I'm out on the road. If I have a spare tube with me, I can put that in my tire for now, and then I can patch my tube later when I have a little bit more time. I also like to carry a cell phone with me, so if I do get stuck, I can contact somebody, and I carry a credit card and some cash with me, and my ID, so driver's license and or a health card and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jackie. I think that's all the questions that we have. But if anybody does have any questions, they can definitely reach you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my email address is on there, actually, down at the bottom. You can see info@adventurous.com.
Okay, perfect. That's great, Jackie. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the webinar. And if you guys have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to Jackie or to any of your Smart Commute staff, and we'll be more than happy to help you and answer any questions you guys might have. So that's the end of the webinar, and we hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.